In the early 1940s, a single name sparked fear in Nazi-occupied France. It was whispered in back alleys and scrawled on secret memos, a name that might have been lost to history if not for her extraordinary deeds. The Gestapo knew her only as the Limping Lady. But her real name was Virginia Hall. This is her story. But before we peel back the layers on this gripping tale, I have a quick request. If you're intrigued by hidden stories and tales of courage against impossible odds, go ahead and tap that like button now. It's a small gesture, but it fuels our journey into the mysteries that lurk beyond the well-lit pages of history. Virginia Hall was born on April 6, 1906, in Baltimore, Maryland. From an early age, she brimmed with ambition and an unshakable sense of adventure. She dreamed of traveling the globe, learning languages, and serving her country. In her formative years, she attended prestigious schools and developed a particular talent for languages: French, German, and Italian. No one could have imagined how crucial those linguistic skills would become. In 1933, fate took a dark turn. While on a hunting trip in Turkey, Virginia accidentally shot herself in the foot. Infection set in quickly, and doctors were forced to amputate her lower left leg. It was a devastating blow that could have shattered her spirit. Instead, Virginia adapted to life with a wooden prosthesis that she nicknamed Cuthbert. That name would soon become an inside joke between her and her future allies. But at the time, it was just another burden she had to bear. Despite this setback, Virginia refused to give up. She pursued a career in diplomacy, serving as a clerk in American embassies. By 1940, the world was plunged into war, and France fell under Nazi occupation. Virginia felt an intense calling to help, but her application to the United States Foreign Service was rejected, partly due to her disability. Instead of quitting, she sailed across the Atlantic to Britain, determined to find another way to serve. It was there, in 1941, that the British Special Operations Executive, commonly known as the SOE, noticed her unwavering determination. The SOE had a singular mission: to conduct espionage, sabotage, and reconnaissance in occupied Europe. They needed people who were resourceful, courageous, and fluent in French. Virginia fit the description perfectly. Prosthetic leg or not, she was ready to volunteer. By August 1941, Virginia was on French soil, operating undercover. She posed as an American reporter for the New York Post, a cover story that allowed her to travel freely, ask questions, and gather intelligence. It didn't take long for her superiors to realize she was invaluable. Not only did she collect and pass on critical information, but she also excelled at helping downed Allied pilots and Jewish refugees escape Nazi clutches. Risking her life daily, she orchestrated safe houses, forged documents, and even coordinated a clandestine network of resistance fighters. Over the next year, Virginia's operations grew more bold and dangerous. By 1942, she had established herself in Lyon, forging an impressive web of contacts and infiltrating the region's black market. Her effectiveness caught the attention of Klaus Barbie, the infamous Butcher of Lyon, and the entire Gestapo hierarchy. Soon, her name became synonymous with the largest spy hunt the Nazis had ever launched in occupied France. Posters were hung, bounties were offered, and traitors were enticed to turn her in. Through all this, Virginia continued her work, discreetly helping new agents arrive and old ones escape. But in November 1942, everything changed. Germany's occupation of Vichy France shifted the danger level overnight. The Gestapo closed in on her network, and several resistance members were captured or compromised. Warned that her cover was on the verge of being blown, Virginia had to flee. With winter looming, she made a perilous escape over the snow-covered Pyrenees into Spain. Imagine crossing mountain peaks in freezing conditions, hiking for days on end with a prosthetic leg. Many able-bodied individuals failed that journey, yet Virginia pressed forward. Sometimes, she had to crawl on her hands and knees over icy terrain. She nearly died of exposure. Still, she would not give up. In early 1943, exhausted and battered, she arrived in Spain. Though the Spanish authorities briefly detained her for entering illegally, she was eventually released. It seemed like a moment to pause and recover, but Virginia didn't believe in rest when the world was at war. She wrote coded letters to the SOE, joking that Cuthbert was giving her trouble, a reference to her prosthetic leg. The British, initially confused, thought Cuthbert might be the code name for another spy. Virginia's irrepressible spirit shone through, even in cryptic messages, as she pushed to return to the fight. Later in 1943, Virginia found a new avenue for her skills. She joined the American Office of Strategic Services, known as the OSS, which was the precursor to the CIA. Under the OSS, Virginia underwent intensive training to return to occupied France. This time, she used a more elaborate disguise. She dyed her hair grey, learned to walk slowly and stoop her shoulders, and even practiced speaking in a rural French accent. She posed as a milkmaid, carefully avoiding detection by the Nazi patrols that were still hunting the Limping Lady. By early 1944, Virginia was back in France, coordinating drop zones for Allied supplies, training resistance fighters, and gathering vital intel ahead of the D-Day invasion. She radioed back crucial details about German troop movements, which helped the Allies plan their attacks. The Nazis still circulated her description, but they no longer recognized her. Under the guise of a humble farmhand, she slipped through their grasp time and time again. On June 6, 1944, the Allies stormed the beaches of Normandy. As the liberation of France began, Virginia's role only intensified. She oversaw sabotage missions that targeted key railways and communication lines, crippling Nazi supply routes. In August 1944, as the Allies pressed forward, the Nazi grip on France began to crumble. Agents like Virginia were the hidden force behind the triumphant Allied advance, and though the Gestapo scrambled to track her down, they never succeeded. When Paris was finally liberated, Virginia's name echoed among the resistance as a hero, though she preferred to stay in the shadows. Her exploits led to her receiving the Distinguished Service Cross in September 1945, the only civilian woman to be honored with such a high military decoration during World War II. The medal was presented by General Donovan himself, the head of the OSS. In his words, her courage and resourcefulness were unmatched. Yet Virginia remained as modest as ever. After the war ended, she continued working in intelligence, transitioning into the newly formed CIA. She never craved public recognition. Secrecy was in her blood by then. She quietly served her country for years, taking on desk jobs and training new recruits. Always sharp, always driven. Virginia Hall retired in 1966, choosing to live a peaceful life away from the spotlight she had once eluded at all costs. She passed away on July 8, 1982, at the age of 76, leaving behind a legacy that defied the odds at every turn. The Nazis feared her so much that they called her the most dangerous Allied spy in all of France. They never believed a one-legged woman could do so much damage to their war machine, and yet she did, over and over again. Today, her story stands as a testament to the power of determination. She never allowed her disability to define her. She walked through fire and ice, literally, to chase her mission. In a world that often underestimated her, she proved that courage can flourish in the most unlikely of circumstances. If you ever doubt that one person can change the course of history, remember Virginia Hall. She was the woman with a wooden leg who outwitted an entire occupation force. She was the shadow the Gestapo couldn't catch, the relentless spy who refused to quit. More than 40 years after her death, her name still inspires those who seek to serve a cause greater than themselves. And if there's one thing her life teaches us, it's that the greatest obstacles can become our greatest strengths, if only we have the courage to keep going.